Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Memorial Day to all of you, especially to our veterans. Jay and I are trying to upgrade our technology and stream to more platforms, but it's giving us a few issues right now, so we apologize for the delay, but I guarantee you it's going to be well worth it. We've got a special Labor Day presentation for you today, special time, and a special guest, and we want to welcome him in from London. He is really in London. I'm really not, but it looks like I am. It's just to honor our guest, Martin. And Jay, you know Martin a little bit better than I do. Why don't you introduce him to our great audience?
Yeah. So Martin, what's up, brother? How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's awesome to have you. So Martin is a guy that I think I started following on Twitter about two and a half years ago. I'll let kind of him tell his story, but he's an IT professional who woke up. He got woke.
Which is amazing in itself.
Well, yeah, he's very, very intelligent, what I would call left brain intellectual dude. And he figured out that something was amiss, as many are now. And he's been writing about it, in my opinion, profoundly and very informatively for years. And his email is amazing. Like I said, he's kind of the one guy in this whole QAnon mythos, in my opinion, who summarizes what's happening from a scientific and practical angle. And he does a really, really good job of examining the evidence. And nobody, regardless of what side of the fence that you fall on, can debate that he is not analyzing things as they are being laid out to us. So with that said, Martin, just tell the world a little bit of your story and how you got to where you are here on the show today.
Okay, so in brief, the thing I'm good at is pulling apart complex belief systems and examining all the little bits and seeing whether they fit together again. And that comes from a childhood spent in the Jehovah's Witnesses, who, bless them,
there you go,
gave me the first-class training in that process. And then I spent the 1990s in the IT industry. I've got a computer science degree, and in the 2000s, I spent a lot of my time at kind of the very bleeding edge of network architecture, network performance science, and engaging in all kinds of sort of paradigm change, which requires challenging people's fundamental beliefs. So in my professional world, I'm used to working outside of what people believe is true. It's normal to be in a place where everyone else is basically mad. And I've been producing a newsletter called The Future of Communications for 7-8 years, with a relatively wide range of interests. It was more or less focused on telecoms, but the figural thing in the whole communications world over the last year or two has been QAnon, or the wider phenomenon of crime, corruption, and societal change. And anyone who's ignoring that story is missing the important stuff. So I've kind of relocated my focus away from technical architecture stuff onto that.
So Martin, let me ask you, and Jeff, just jump in. Why are people, and again, obviously this is an opinion and a supposition question for you, and we have some amazing points, by the way, for everybody who's watching us today. And also let me just say, because I know Jeffrey said this, everybody who's watching this show today around the world, and there will be many, both live and in recording, please recognize and celebrate the fine servicemen and women who have allowed us to have free technology and have this amazing ability to be sitting here joining hands today. We talk a lot of negative stuff about how technology is full of bad stuff, but it also allows us to all be connected in this realm. So anyway, again, please give thanks. But Martin, my question for you is, why are so many people not able to look at what you were able to look at and come away with the same conclusion?
That's a good question. There's a certain rigor and hygiene that's required, a ruthlessness in examining the facts and their relationships and putting to one side one's feelings. So the skill set I've developed in looking at subjects like network neutrality, in telecoms, and seeing how people are motivated by a belief system, the things that they aspire to, which may be good in the world, but are attached to underlying facts and theories which cannot be supported. I've kind of taken that skill set, I've moved it across to this Q world. So why is it that I see stuff other people find it hard to see? I think there's maybe several parts to answering that. One of which is kind of trite and trivial, which is I looked at the data. It's I spent, I'll be answered in a second. I spent hours and hours and hours and hours, I probably spent 1,000 hours working night after night after night, into the early hours, looking at the Q drops and cross-referencing those with other information about the world that I could gather before I put my name to any of this stuff. So there's a certain amount of just work that's required. I think there's also then sort of a thinking toolkit that's required, which is both logical and psychological. So there are a number of sort of clues I've picked up over the years to be able to pull apart these problems into their individual little component parts and examine them separately and put them back together again cleanly. So give you an example of that would be knowing there's a difference between the feeling of knowing and actual logic and knowing. Yeah, just because you feel you know something, that doesn't tell us very much about the world. We have to put that feeling to one side, and we have to look at the actual data, what to actually say, and it can make us very uncomfortable. So there's an emotional journey that has to be undertaken internally to deal with the discomfort of not knowing or having to unlearn things. There's other parts of our sort of technical toolkit or philosophical toolkit. So like, the Greeks have the idea of doxa and episteme, that there's cheap opinions versus fully formed and reasoned facts. And be able to tell the difference between these things. And then from computer science, there's a toolkit which I bring to this problem. So there's a language and a framework for thinking about problems. So we have concepts like intentional, denotational, operational semantics. In other words, what should you want? What should you ask for? What do you get? Yeah, very fancy words for simple ideas. But that thinking toolkit from thinking about complex problems in the computer science world is the one that I've brought across to this space. So it's a combination of the inner journey of how you relate to facts and the feelings about facts, psychology of this stuff, and then you might think of the epistemology or the philosophy of how do you decompose complex information problems.
Martin, I think you hit on a big point that a lot of people won't get, the fact of your being reared as a Jehovah's Witness, because a lot of that feeds right into it. As a witness, number one, you realize, the whole paradigm is wrong. So you have the intellectual bravery to come out of a set dominant paradigm into a new realm. Right. And if there's anything that the Jehovah's Witnesses do, and I'm not a fan of the Jehovah's Witness overall, but they do teach you to look at data and look at information from a relatively objective point of view. And they do teach you a lot about communication. I mean, the Theocratic Ministry School teaches you how to go out and communicate to people door to door to door. So a lot of these things that are in your background that some would say, it's so terrible that you did this or did that or had to go through this, they have all really worked together to bring you to a rather unique position to be able to look at something. And it really mystifies me that more IT, more scientist type people are not coming into what we would call truth, because if you can just look at the data objectively and empirically, it almost screams out. So I think your background has you rather uniquely qualified to be where you are today.
So there are two things I'd like to take out of that. Firstly is that I had one parent, my mother, who was in Jehovah's Witnesses, and my father not. So it forced me to construct a cosmology, kind of like this. So the cosmology that encompassed them both very quickly from a young age. So I didn't have to choose between my parents. It's like, and then the second thing I'll take away from my Jehovah's Witness experience is just because all the people around you are good people who are well-meaning and behave well, and all agree on something being the truth, and all agree that anyone outside of that thing is crazy, that means nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing, right? It's that should not sway you whatsoever. Is you have to look at the evidence, right? You have to look at the facts directly, and you have to look at competing theories as to what's right, and no matter where they may take you, and how far away from what is socially accepted.
And that tees us up rather well for the whole QAnon thing, because it seems to be team QAnon, non-team QAnon, and the people that are for can't look at the trees or at the forest of QAnon, and the people that are pro QAnon can't look at the shortcomings. So an objective approach is what is crucially needed, and it seems like from a lot of your work that you're applying that. And how would you recommend to people that they look at the QAnon information and be able to decipher, what's emotional, what's knee-jerk reactionalism, and what's the best way to look at this wealth of information and extract usable data from it?
So it is a very big and complex information landscape. It's a bit like receiving satellite maps and terrain maps, radar maps, and trying to sort of integrate them together into sort of cartography. The pattern I've observed is that this stuff is much easier to make sense of when it's personal. And the people who have tended to wade into it first, the people who've experienced some kind of reality dislocation or trauma or something in life that makes them want to investigate further and to challenge the narrative that they've been given. I mean, the Q drops themselves and all the other supporting stuff that comes from the chans is enormous. It's a huge amount of information to ingest. The underlying story is quite simple, but the actual, that data set is very, very big. So to focus it, you need to think about, well, what really matters to me? What part of my life do I possibly want to change, be different? Which thing is affecting me? It could be I've got a member of my family who's experiencing corruption in the healthcare industry. Or I've got someone who's a veteran who's got PTSD. Whatever it is approach it from that angle, and it gives you a purpose. Right? Don't try to swallow the whole of this thing in one go. And I would also say to make sense of it is in some ways step back from it and adopt a much broader view of the self-learning process that the self-education process. So it's only after I discovered subjects I never knew existed. So for example, ponerology, the academic study of evil, right? There are books on ponerology, right? Or psychopathy, which are out there. And this is not woo, it's not controversial stuff. But it's part of the kind of the base education that you need in order to, I think, properly engage with and understand the Q stuff. So I think don't see the Q stuff as kind of the separate little isolated world of conspiracy theorists. Is every one of us needs to upgrade our intuition to understand spiritual issues, psychological issues, criminal issues, how these gangs, how the monetary system really works, all this stuff. Yeah, there's a big curriculum of things to upgrade your education about. Some of which are more controversial, some of which are less. But it's up to you as a citizen and an adult to figure out what bits are most important and relevant to you, and take that learning journey on. So it's kind of a paradoxical answer: is the best way to engage with Q is not to.
So Martin, that's very eloquently stated, and I agree with all those things. But I think it means to be said, or needs to be said. And again, Jeff and I have talked about this many times on the show. Some people don't want to live in reality. I mean, we literally could discuss this, all day. I mean, this is the whole, the allegory of the cave. I mean, many people would prefer to be lied to, bullshitted, live in their holographic social media infused reality. They don't even want the truth. I mean, how many of us have learned, again, we said this, and, Martin, this is probably, I mean, it's not new to you, but, new that you're on the show, but it's actually spiritual violence to attempt to awaken other people who have no intention of waking up. And, again, the great gurus will say that awareness comes to those when it does.
And I've made that mistake, with family members and said, look, there's all this stuff going on. It's risky. It's like you should pay attention. Or at the very least, you should have your 72-hour packet because you live in California anyway.
Right, exactly.
People's earthquakes or whatever. It's like, have you got that sorted? Right? It's like, this is basics. It's just humor me, right?
Exactly.
There's this idea that I found very powerful in my professional world, and it's translatable to this one. It's from Gestalt theory. It's called Weiss's paradox of change. Yeah, is we only change when we fully identify what is, not what with what could be or what should be or might be. So until people want to identify what is, then talking to them about other possible futures or how the world could be is completely pointless. They won't identify what is until they feel some motivating trigger. So, people who want to give up smoking is, rather than focusing on the future state of not smoking, or the willpower of not smoking, is merely writing down how many cigarettes you consume is the way of identifying with your smoking. But you won't engage with that until you feel, or some lover rejects you, or whatever it is, you got bad breath.
Your eyes turn yellow.
Run out of money, whatever the thing is. Yeah, it's like, so there has to be a motivating factor. And it's not our job to supply other people's motivating factors. Now, it is our job to push them back over a boundary when their craziness comes into our space. It's not our job to solve their madness.
That's so elegantly stated.
We're all crazy.
Elegantly stated. Jeff, put that up. That's Martin's quote now. It's not our job to solve their madness.
And it's what it struck me by what you said was, even though that's obviously very, very true, can it be our job, Martin and Jay, to help people to accept and understand the reality that we're really in?
Yes. So the service to self is, I'm really frustrated about your madness, right? Because it annoys me. But that doesn't help you. It's the point at which the other person needs our help. Yeah, there's that boundary. Which way is this going? It's am I trying to change them by force? And as you say, it's an act of spiritual violence. And it's only by making that mistake you realize, whoops, it's not appropriate. And what I've observed from my personal life. So I went through some difficult times 10 years ago, getting divorced, coming out, all that kind of stuff. It's like and by modeling the behavior that I wanted other people to adopt, then they start to follow you. Is by trying to change them, disaster zone. It's like, and trying to change other people in a feelings infused environment. So getting divorced was very feelings infused.
We know that, we share that reality.
We're here because it's logical. It was crazy, right? I look back in retrospect. Of course, you wouldn't do that. It's like because of feelings. So the place that many of us are approaching this from, which is a rationalist point of view, can blind us to the feeling place the others are in, and to fail to empathize with them, with the pain of letting go of that sense of safety they get from comfortable delusion. Right? So again, from my consulting work, there's a lovely 2x2 matrix, because all consultants have a good 2x2 matrix. On one axis, you've got safety. The other one, you've got certainty. Yeah, you've got unsafe, safe, uncertain, certain. Yeah, and when people are really motivated to change is when they feel unsafe and uncertain. Yeah, and what they want to have is certain safety, but that's completely delusional in this world. And what you have to be able to offer them is a safe uncertainty. Yeah,
I like it.
You need to be able to. I'm going to help you to shift. But I'm going to take you away from your sense of certainty about the world, which is very unsafe, because what you're believing is delusional, right? It's I'm going to move you from certain unsafety to safe uncertainty. So you're shifting them around this 2x2 matrix, but that requires to go with them on the emotional journey. So beating them over the head with rationalism is a little bit unkind. It is necessary for us to have done our rigorous hygiene and our epistemology and our philosophy, and particularly as we get to very, very complex questions about the relationships in physics and metaphysics and how our world is constructed and deceptions, and it's hard. Yeah, this is not easy. But there's kind of a base layer of, look, this is just how the world is.
And Martin, if the Q information has done anything, and I don't think this can really be argued, it has caused a great number of people who were blissfully unaware, just going along their lives. It has caused them to stop, take notice, and begin to think about things that they've never thought about before. And it would seem to me, at least, that is a service to humanity, because people that would have never even thought to look at things the way they really are now at least considering that. So you can't throw the whole of the queue out with the proverbial bathwater, at least in my opinion.
Correct. And given that much of Q is constructed on the Socratic method, so it's just a list of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If you're against asking questions, I've got a problem with you. You know, it's like, and these are ordinary legitimate questions about current affairs. So the whole process around Kavanaugh or Barr, this whole justice process is an objective thing in the world. This is not woo. You know, it's and Q has been offering us bits of concrete information and appropriate questions to ask ourselves. So if you're against that, you've got a problem, not me. It's,
Absolutely. You've got a problem with the world because, I'm a practitioner of NLP, and one of the great statements of NLP that is so powerful is it is the quality of the questions that you ask yourself that's going to determine the quality of your life.
I'm going to give you an example of that. So I was doing an interview this last week with a documentary filmmaker about this Q stuff. And so I get asked the question, Martin, so is this Q stuff, is it true? And the answer to that is insufficiently robust question. Is there are at least two important questions, one of which is operational semantics. Right? Is Q an operation of the Trump administration communicating? Yeah. And then separately, maybe the intentional semantics of, is this a good thing? Yeah. It's and the former question is one which can be, it's ordinary evidence that will stand up in a law court. The Q proofs, which are really Q evidence points, point towards the fact that this is a agency of the Trump administration talking to us. The separate thing of where does this take us? Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a different question. Okay? So until you start to pull the problem apart into meaningful, separable questions, which can be answered in a sort of highly coherent, loosely coupled way, talk about our computer science ideas, then you end up just bamboozled and confused because you kind of part answer this question, it pulls in half of this question, and it just doesn't work. Yeah. So you need to have a thinking framework that lets you cut this thing into separate little blocks, which are perfectly perpendicular, and then you can pull them apart, look at the block, ooh, those fit or those don't fit. Yeah. It's but without the thinking framework, you're lost.
So with all that said, Martin, okay, because first off, obviously Jeff and I agree with you. You're so, like I said, when I posted in the group, you're such an intellectual in this.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, not everybody's an intellectual today, brother.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of like really distill this in ways that people, bite-sized chunks so people can understand. Obviously, I'm with you and I'm following you. I know Jeff's following you too. But obviously some people in the group are not following you. So I just want to make sure that we're going down the path. And so I'm going to just take you back and dumb it down technically.
Okay, dumb it down.
I want to do. Okay. So I want your opinion right now of the current state of affairs. And, you can give a 2 to 3 minute high level summary of where we were before Donald Trump took over. And then before you answer that, is Donald Trump a willing or an unwilling participant in the Q mythos?
Okay. So where were we in 2016?
Yeah.
In trouble.
That's so true.
Major trouble.
So I lived in the United States from 2001 to 2004, and I've spent about 5 years of my adult life in the US. I've been going back and forth with business, and I've got a brother who lives in California. It's and I watched that societal stress and that decline even over that period. And turning up in places like Oakland and seeing the people camped under the freeway,
right?
And also just watching,
by the way.
and also just personally noting the difference between early 2000s and how much kind of surplus there was around for doing interesting stuff in the corporate world, and how it got squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Yeah, I could feel it. Yeah, it's like, and also just watching the sense of fear, creeping fear and division across the whole of society.
Interesting.
It was tangible. At the same time, you might think of it as it's kind of a negative space, a hole, which I was just utterly puzzled by, which was I spent my recreational hours for a number of years figuring out things like 9/11. Okay, this story doesn't make sense. Help, help. But hang on, if that means that can't have happened, and that must mean these people are gangsters, why is there no reaction to this? Where's the justice process? Where's the military? Where's the what's happening here? So I was carrying this thought of, look, I don't get this. I don't understand. I don't see the reaction to it. It's it doesn't make sense. And Mr. Trump arrives with a de facto military government with a nice civilian veneer to keep everyone from panicking. And that answered my question. Okay, here it is. It's arrived, and it can only arrive once, and it can only do its job once. It's and the nature of Donald Trump's relationship to that movement is something which I just assumed 3 or 4 years ago. He was a loudmouth billionaire and TV personality.
Right, and that's what most people thought.
Yeah, I got no other information. And then soon after he was elected, I started to look into these allegations that he was a racist, whatever. And there was no data. There was no evidence. It's like,
Right.
hang on a minute, you're telling me this thing, but it's like so.
And all the objective data was actually to the contrary.
Yes.
Yeah, to the contrary, exactly 180 degrees to the contrary. So I don't know how far back this goes and how deep it involves the Trump family and other bloodline type families. So clearly we're dealing with a phenomenon which goes back generations, if not millennia.
Right.
Very, very, very deep roots to this deep state thing, back to biblical times and before potentially, and the rise of these cults and cultures of psychopathy. And then in order to tackle a problem of that multi-generational nature, presumably the response is also multi-generational. But the very nature of occult war and these secret societies is they're secret. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you kind of have to infer it by the shadows and the leakages you get around the edges, and it's the Behold the Pale Horses, and there's a few books and things that give you clues as to what's going on. But
the great work by Bill Cooper, right?
Yeah. It's,
now, Martin, did I understand you to say that you see the Trump administration as sort of a thinly veiled de facto military takeover?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, the only possible response is it's a war. It's a real life war.
Right. Right.
What do you expect here?
Well, Martin, so let me just say this, and I've said this before on the show, and I don't want to jump you because you're going down an awesome rabbit hole, and I'll let you proceed, but it doesn't make any sense plausibly that it's not a military coup, because Hillary and the cabal and whatever you want to call them, the deep state, there's a million different names for them, the dark forces, they had actually rigged all of the voting machines.
Yes.
So there's no way that Trump should have won anyway. So it's like, Jeff and I said this many times, it was almost like a divine act that he won. And there may be even parts to that.
What's better than a divine act? A divine act backed by military weaponry.
It's an information war.
Right.
It's and what surprised or shocked me was how far back it went and how early into the history of the American Republic, as in the very early 18th century, that the reverse takeover from the British Crown and the monarchy and the Vatican and everything else coming back to, and exactly how this works, even because even to this point, to this point today, I'm still slightly mystified about how these all relate to each other.
Right.
It seems that this fight for freedom from central banking, usury,
totalitarianism,
tyrannical, hijacked spiritual systems, whatever it is, that's blood sacrifice cults, has been going on for ever.
A long time.
All of history. It's and so in some ways maybe society has been militarized all along, and the idea that it's been anything else is a fantasy.
Martin, how do you respond to people, and we have them in the chat room, that there is no way, no how, absolutely impossible that anyone, some of these people, and there's a large, probably about 49.99% of them, there's no way they could ever see Donald Trump as anything other than a buffoon and a danger and a horrible person. There's no way they could see him as a white hat sent to help at all. What do you say to those people?
Good question, Jeff.
This is a war of deception.
Right. It's a perception war.
Sun Tzu. Yes,
There you go.
It's and also it's an element of hubris. Yeah. So I've
Great word.
Yeah. Yes, I'm an intellectual, and I've been working at the very apex, bleeding edge computer science, and I know what bright looks like.
Right.
Yeah, I know what not stupid looks like, and I'm not a political thinker. You know, I'm a different kind of animal. You know, it's a Machiavellian stuff. You know, spy thrillers, not my thing.
It is great to have a foreigner, you know, you are from another country, look with an objective view at our country and our government. It's very, very helpful.
Yes, so I'm deeply aware of American politics, culture, etc. And I spent a lot of time living in America. But I'm not American, and therefore I'm also not so vested in the moment. You know,
right.
Yeah, and I'm not. And there is something different about being outside the country and not being viscerally affected by the people around you going nuts. It's or at least they're going nuts in a different way over here.
Right.
So what's the question again?
I don't think we'll see Trump cry, no matter what happens to him. So Mrs. May did, but I don't think we'll ever see Trump cry.
The idea that people who assume that Donald Trump is a buffoon, maybe because he misspells his tweets.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes people are a lot smarter than you. And even at the levels I've been playing at, there are people who are a lot smarter than me. You know, things like mathematics, I'm not very good. Yeah, it's like I've got a degree in it, but people can thrash me at it, and sometimes you can be so outclassed that you can not even realize what the game is. and I noticed this in my telecom stuff. It's there are many people who network architecture stuff don't even think of having an argument with. They have no concept of what even the space in which legitimate debate can happen is. You know, it's and are so overconfident in their understanding and their abilities. So I'm very used to working in that kind of environment, and that's how it is. A lot of people have, you know, Dunning-Kruger effect. They have great overestimation of their abilities.
And you know, Martin, you'll know this. Sorry, Jay. You'll know this from your time in the Bible. There was a guy that was fairly well received, not at his time, but in later years, named Jesus. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Beware when all men speak well of you." So I would think that the opposite of that might be very well true as well. And if you think about Donald Trump, it's not just the left that hates him. Right. It's the right that hates him. Right. Everybody hates him. Maybe even Melania hates him. So he's got to be doing something right if the entirety of the governmental power structure loathes him.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think you have to recognize that this is a military endeavor here, and he's a lightning conductor for people's psychological reaction to profound change. He's a repository into which they can project all of their stuff. Yeah.
Isn't that true? The people that love him can project their positivity on him. The people that hate him can project their positivity on him. That makes him a rather unique individual.
Yes, and my sense of him is that he potentially, despite the Donald persona, is quite a sensitive person underneath.
I would agree.
I think that's true. I think that his interview, remember guys, when he did the interview back in the early 90s, before he was anybody even famous, he was just Donald Trump, the skyscraper mogul. He was interviewed, I think it was on Barbara Walters, was it? He said he wanted to be president one day. And they were
I think it was Oprah, actually.
Was Oprah. Okay, one of the two. But again, so I think what Martin said, this goes back. Okay, so this is just my interpretation, and this goes into the next 3 points that I want to ask Martin. This is what you said, Martin. This is a breakaway civilization war. This is an elite grouping around the globe, probably involves different countries, obviously different ethnicities. and different royal bloodline families. This is their squabbles that are now carried out into the open because, as we all know, the globalists were literally about to turn the lights out on all of us.
Yep.
And so whoever Trump is repping, whatever faction of a, again, of a breakaway civilization war, and I get that quote, of course, from Dr. Joseph P. Farrell, who's an amazing friend of the show. The reality is this is what we're all witnessing now. And so we don't understand who Donald Trump reps. We don't even know who he's fighting. We don't know if Russians and the Koreans are on our side. They probably are, but no one knows. And so it's like everybody in this three-dimensional world that we live in is trying to construct of good versus bad. We want to make the box, like you were talking about your box as a thinker, as intellectual. You guys in tech, you guys have 4 boxes, but like most people just want a sandbox where it's divided down the middle.
Yeah.
You want the good guy and the bad guy, and I want to decide who I'm going to vote for. And this is way beyond that. What are your thoughts to that?
Right. So again, in my technical world, we have this concept of a universe of discourse, right? And if your universe of discourse is too small, not big enough to encompass the real problem domain, then you end up coming up with really crazy ideas about the world. So to give an example of that is the current internet is treated as being the complete set of all networks that could ever be built. And people do network research by going off into the internet and looking at it, forgetting that they're only looking at one tiny corner case of the set of possible networks that could be built. But they've treated it as the whole universe. So in this political space, once you start to understand that there is dark power, occult power, and all these secret societies and bloodlines and hidden history, there's a universe of discourse you need to build to make sense of the world, which is potentially much bigger than the one you started off with and learnt at college or at school. And it's potentially also unknown size. You don't know how deep is the rabbit hole. It's very hard to tell. And so it's very hard to know when you've kind of incorporated enough base knowledge into your sense of the world to be able to work out which way is even up or down. And I found myself changing my mind and sort of flipping around on various issues time and time again, because it's very disorientating, particularly once you start to understand how much power comes from, well, particularly dark or evil power comes from deception. Right. So when you're trying to unpack these layers of like a fractal of deception, 1 minute you're heading this way, next minute you're heading that way. It's are they good or are they bad? It's like it's very hard to tell.
So here's the deep question. So there's 3 other bullet points that we haven't covered that we want to go deep down the rabbit hole with Martin. So I mean, obviously it's your opinion, Martin, but you're obviously incredibly educated and well researched and very intelligent. So I'm just going to ask you the woo-woo question because I have to ask it.
Sure.
And we always ask this question, but I just want to see where you have gone, where you actually allow your, intellectual prowess expand.
Yeah.
Are we watching something that is a war in heaven, so to speak, a off-world, interdimensional, interplanetary, not experienced by humans in our little limited prism schism that we have of 3 dimensions? Is that what we're witnessing it? And it's towards now like an end of an age, as the Mayans said that the long count calendar ended in 2012. But is that kind of where we're witnessing now? Because there really is no explanation for what's going on around us. What do you think?
So to tackle that kind of problem, I found myself rethinking some of my basic beliefs about the nature of reality and our role in it, and consciousness and physics and metaphysics. And it's and I realized I actually don't know very much.
Right. None of us do.
So, I got sent off to one of London's top private schools. I went to Oxford. I got an education.
Right.
And now I have to realize that it didn't really do well. It was nice, but in a very limited way. It's right, like, exactly. And I received basically no spiritual education. So even just things like giving up art at an early age.
Hold on, let me stop you. No one that went through religion received any spiritual education either, did they, Jeffrey Daugherty?
No, they didn't. Not if the religious people could help it.
No. It's so what I've noticed is that the scientific materialist model of the world, where everything has to have a cause and effect, all phenomena have to be explicable through the scientific method, appears to be having trouble accounting for the most obvious thing in science, which is the scientist. And its axiom is that the scientists themselves can be entirely explained by these, the molecules bouncing around. It's like, that's an interesting assumption. So I kind of stepped back and I said, well, there's these other folks over here, and these other folks, these theist folks and Christians, they seem to be completely outperforming those people at the moment at making sense of the world. So maybe they got something that's worth paying attention to. It's and even if it's just the thinking framework and the language of theology and hermeneutics or whatever, it's like you learn something from them. It's the role of good versus evil. So I've had to loosen my kind of base feeling about how the world works and how I was taught how science relates to metaphysics and everything else, and go, oh, well, actually, maybe I'm not so smart after all. And maybe there are multiple possibilities here, and they aren't necessarily, you don't have to be, woo or anything. It's completely crazy, as it were. It's but maybe I just need to kind of lighten up a bit and say, I might have a lot to learn still, and I'm open to many possibilities. And sort of take a very sort of concrete, grounded one. The idea that we are the only intelligent species around, and this is a very lonely neighborhood.
Right.
That's an interesting assumption. And so becoming aware of one's assumptions and therefore the other possible conceptions of the world is the process at the moment.
Yeah, mental plasticity is so important, and nobody can do it.
Yeah, I don't need an answer. It's the safe uncertainty is what matters. And the safe uncertainty comes from one's construction of self, and one's the safety can't come from being a conservative or a liberal or straight.
Exactly.
Any identity thing, yeah.
And we have some of those smartest people on YouTube in this chat room, and even in our chat room, there's people that have decided, boom, this is the way it is. Boom, that's the way it is. And you completely shut out any other possibility outside of your narrow little perspective. Learn how to maintain competing ideas in your mind simultaneously so as not to shut yourself off to information from all sides.
Well said.
Particularly to integrate your heart with this, your other chakras. It's bring your whole human body to this process.
Right.
All your chakras. It's like, so I realized a few years ago, due to a provocation in the world, that I wanted to be remembered as much for having a kind heart as having a brutal intellect.
That's awesome.
Well stated.
Awesome, bro.
Yeah?
That's awesome.
And I've been through some humbling experiences, and I've really screwed up at times in my life. And
I never have. I've been perfect.
Thank you. I'm glad to. I'll be talking to you afterwards. And it's only that those experiences have given me a different perspective. And I look at people who've maybe lived a very straightforward life, and in some ways how quite narrow their perspective can be. So the problems we're dealing with here are not ones generally that require massive intellectual ability. It doesn't do any harm, but that isn't the problem. Yeah, right. It's about understanding your role and your feelings and your social relationships and how your belief systems come into your construction of self and your ego and how it all fits together. Yeah, your therapy, as it were.
Let me interject something someone in the chat room said, which is very profound. And Michelle says, most people only seek out truths to get their predetermined narrative confirmed, i.e. confirmation bias.
Right.
Yes.
And that's what social media has created. Everybody is in their own echo chambers now, and they stay in that safe confine.
Mm-hmm. And it's not research if you're just researching to prove yourself right. You have to get some level of objectivity. Martin, another question from the chat room. How much do you conjecture that AI might be involved in the whole Q phenomenon?
I would be surprised if it wasn't.
Right, of course.
I mean, it would be one of the first tools I'd reach for in constructing something of that complexity.
Right.
it's kind of the parallel question to that is who is Q? How is Q and who is Q are kind of two sides of the same coin.
Right.
And I kind of go, who cares at this point? It's like because it's down in the operational semantics level, but the mechanisms, yeah. And what I've learned from my professional work in telecoms is people obsess about mechanisms, but mechanisms aren't necessarily the thing that's interesting. It's the wrong piece of the semantics. So you kind of need to work at a sort of higher conceptual level to look at the overall picture of how this thing hangs together, rather than how it was made. What color crayon we use to write it in isn't very interesting.
Doesn't really, man. Some people think that Donald Trump is writing with crayons. I can guarantee you that. But as a British national, I'm assuming you are.
Yeah.
When you look at Nancy Pelosi and you look at Chuck Schumer and you look at this AOC lady, what do you think?
Clones. NPCs.
We're watching a movie, and it's a very well scripted movie.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
Of course. It's a Truman Show.
I think to make sense of the present, you have to look quite a long way back into the past. So if you take maybe, say, the de facto coup that happened with JFK, presumably there's been a plan that's been built ever since that moment by white hats and patriots to retake the republic. And the easy bit is getting rid of the deep state. The hard bit is not destroying society and the world in the process. So my assumption is that a very sophisticated process and plan has been put in place for a very, very long time, with people put in place and positioned maybe generations in advance. And we're watching all this stuff dancing around on the surface, which is designed to create the right kind of optics to make people behave and believe in the right ways to generate the outcome. And there's an element of the trust the plan thing, which is I don't have the underlying data set, as it were, about, I don't have access to the mass surveillance systems. I don't have access to all of the psychological research and all the Tavistock type stuff.
Right.
So it's above my pay grade.
Okay,
right.
so
Wow.
So I find that hard to believe.
I do too, but that's okay. It's humility. That's
actually,
great.
I have some funny questions in the background. They're like, I just got a couple people that are like, Jay, I think Martin is Q.
One thing I've noticed is that the MAGA folks are the best looking.
The MAGA folks are the best looking. Nice.
All right, so hold on. So I got a bunch of great questions for you. And by the way, folks, this is going to be a 90-minute edition of The Last Stand, as long as Martin is okay. Are you good with that, Martin? Okay,
awesome.
Great. So guys, please listen, because our inner circle group that Martin is now a proud part of has asked some amazing questions. So this is hardcore and this affects all of us. So I think the first question I'm going to ask you is address the whole debt bubble, right? This Ponzi scheme, central bank driven, qualitative easing, low interest rate, BS that has kept this scandalous economy, global economy running for like the last 8-10 years since, the last decline.
Last 6,000 years.
Well, obviously.
Good point.
The money magic system has been going on for a long time.
Babylonian money magic.
Yeah, exactly. How does
Martin is made for our WhatsApp group.
Yeah, I told you. So okay. So the question though is, and I'm just reading it literally, is how are we going to resolve the debt bubble? Is it possible?
Okay. If I answer this by analogy to the networking problem, right? The current internet is a pile of shite, right?
Right.
But it works so well.
It is show. There's one thing it does well, everything else is like, oh my god, how did they ever make this work at all? It's like, so it's a tiny little corner case.
Well, Al Gore invented it, so we know who to blame.
Thank you, Al. It's a tiny corner case of a set of distributed computing systems we could possibly build. Yeah, so money is a technology. Right? Money is a technology which can be architected. It's a information transfer technology of some kind, and there's a possibility space of building money technologies, and blockchain is a sort of enabling thing for doing it in distributed ways. Yeah. So So the current money architecture makes it relatively easy to do certain things. So, for example, it makes it relatively easy to create money and use it for blackmailing or funding both sides of wars, and then laundering the money in various ways that can't be traced, and therefore creates deniability as to the crimes you committed. And the current monetary system also lacks what us computer scientists call invariance. So balance sheets, for example, of a thing, the credits and debits have to line up, yeah?
Not in the United States of America, Martin.
So there are huge, you can create black budgets, all kinds of stuff that in the current money architecture. And there are actually quite strong parallels between the internet architecture and the money architecture.
Interesting.
That's advanced class. So my sense is that we can redesign our concept of money and also build money which is about self-sovereign IOUs.
Right.
Ultimately, it's about tradability IOUs. All money is debt.
Right.
I promise to give you something in return for these 5 flowers. It's like something of equivalent value to that. Yeah, it's, so we can structure new kinds of IOUs that are tradable and fungible and have all the right properties. So this is a solvable problem, but I'm not an expert in that domain. Yeah.
Wow, that's very optimistic, Martin.
Actually, no, I think it's not optimistic. Let's go back to this thing of having the right frameworks and thinking tools.
Right.
So the concepts of invariance and audit trails and there's some very simple abstractions about the world let you say, I want to have it these properties because these properties are ethically good. Yeah.
Right.
So,
right.
And so you can engineer a system which has those properties rather than taking a bunch of things that happen in the world and just working with them. Right. It's treating them as immutable and beyond our ability to reflect upon. So in our computer science world, we are God.
Right.
I can create new universes with different properties. What kind of universe do you like to have? Right. It's now in the natural world, natural science, we aren't God. We have to take what we're given. But in unnatural science, okay, universes that we construct, we're God. What kind of universe do you like, sir? It's so. I think actually it is not optimistic at all. It is necessary.
I like it.
Right.
So well said. So Martin, you're again, and by the way, guys, if you haven't subscribed to Martin's newsletter, please, for the love of God, subscribe to it. His information is incredible. He actually collates the best articles online of what's happening. So again, not just, it's not his supposition or opinion. He's substantiating his ideas and his thoughts with data, which again, he's amazing at doing. I do want to ask you this because again, you summarized this. So you foresee, and I'm totally, by the way, in agreement with this, as much as it's weird and most people struggle with this. And I know Jeff and I have talked about this, but you foresee by 2020, 2021, you foresee Trump being reelected, which I think we all can agree on right now because the Democratic Party is a debacle. Whatever they are. I mean, they're a cancer, a debacle, whatever. The bottom line is, are we going to see a completely reformed, restructured society? And in that, are we going to see the brick and mortar, architecture of the quote unquote current paradigm collapse, which obviously will lead to pain?
There's a great book by Dmitry Orlov called Reinventing Collapse. And talks about the collapse of the Soviet Union and how it caught people by surprise. But there are some people who adapted fast and realized they were no longer theoretical physicists, but they were street corner toothpaste salespeople.
There you go.
And they stepped into their new role and acted into it and did okay. There are other people who are very attached to how things were. I'm a theoretical physicist. I've lost my job. I'll go look for another job in theoretical physics. There wasn't one, right?
Right.
They suffered. Okay. It's so collapse is a natural process of like decomposition, fungus. It's a necessary thing in order to clear space. I think that once we understand how how precarious our situation has been, socially, politically, violence-wise, environmentally. We're pretty close to the edge. That's going to provide a major motivation for fundamental restructuring. Once we understand the role of psychopaths and pathocracy and how they came to hijack all our key institutions and what they did with them, particularly what they did to children.
Eating kids, right.
It's like that's going to provide a lot of motivation for change. I think there's also going to be a natural social reordering, which is quite helpful to be kind of reality-based if you want to be able to act in the world sensibly. And my sense is that this Q operation has multiple purposes, and one of them is a discernment filter.
Right.
It's kind of a reverse osmosis kind of thing or something. It's like who can go through this boundary, this barrier with the holes this big, and what it's doing is it's drawing out those with the necessary emotional tools as well as thinking tools to make sense of the world and to be the leaders in a service to others model.
So Martin, that is maybe the most brilliant thing. And you've said a lot of amazingly brilliant things here, because, you know, Nick Andrews is in our group, has been saying this for probably a year and a half, that this was all a giant conditioning run to prepare those with eyes to see and ears to hear, to be able to sustain the rest who run into the streets in an outright panic when they realize that Tom Hanks is chewing on our kids.
And that's not even the heavy stuff.
Right. That's just the emotional stuff.
Yeah, there's far, you know, there are things that there are images that I wish I never had to put in my head.
I'm certain.
It's and I think of what some of the military, whether intelligence community or in the sort of more, the more kinetic parts of the military, have had to go through, and what the public currently basically have no clue as to what's been going on. There's a lot of trauma there. And today's the day on which to remember it as well. It's
absolutely.
It's chastening and humbling to start to realize how little about the world even relatively educated and informed people actually knew. And I'm constantly learning more fundamental things about how our world is constructed, and discovering my zone of uncertainty is growing and growing. So it's well,
let me ask you a question about that, Martin. So you're a very extreme intellectual, advanced guy. You've been, essentially with the cognoscenti of the computer world and the, information systems and all the things you do, programming and stuff. Why is it that you were able to change from, a super rigid left brain intellectual to a guy now who feels and emotes and is connected with his heart chakra, and others can't? And before you answer, I think, Nick has said this to me a number of times. And by the way, Nick and you should do a podcast together, because you guys are like at the same intellectual level. But the bottom line is that some people are so rooted in intellectualism that if you just put that carrot out in front of them, that's all they chase. And so that's their science, that's their scientism, and then that's their delusion, and then they're safe in that delusion. So I think it takes a lot of courage for you to become who you were. But maybe just touch on that for a second.
Suffer.
Okay. So you had to have a dark night of the soul.
Yeah, it's so I guess I fall into the classic autist cultural paradigm.
Well, you are an artist, really, when you think about what you do.
No, he said autist.
Oh, autist. Okay.
So we'll come to the artist in a moment.
Okay,
that's relevant. So I grew up two things. One was my nickname at school was Boffin, because I was clearly bright, and but also I grew up gay, and in a world which was not accepting of that. And I spent 5 years basically splitting myself off into an acceptable Martin and an unacceptable Martin, and then having a crisis that nearly killed me, and then 10 years plus of reintegration.
I can't even imagine the energy it takes to maintain those dual Martins.
You don't want to know. It's like a lot of self-destruction. Right. So the work I've had to do to deal with that and integrate myself and to cope with what I would call unreality collapse. So, I went through unreality collapse with the Jehovah's Witnesses. You can't believe what these people tell you. I've had to go through a deep internal unreality collapse, and then I've had to deal with unreality collapses in my professional world. So I've become conditioned at some level to figuring out how to cope with the loss of safety and the uncertainty and the terror that comes with suddenly not knowing, and even not knowing who you are at quite a deep level.
Wow.
And having to do the reconstruction process and the rebuilding, and having to deal with continue relating to my ex-wife, and I've got 2 kids, and it's like, and having to learn how to love properly, and how to love myself a little bit, and to stop making cleverness my pole star and making loving kindness my pole star.
That's awesome, man. That's
so
truly amazing.
And I had to really, really suffer, and I'm still getting there. It's like it's still work in progress. And then life kind of supplied me with some forced learning journeys. So, for example, bumping into someone who was homeless and spending 3 years looking after her. A year when she had no income. I didn't want to do it. I don't want to spend my last pounds on her. It's like, but I had to.
That's awesome, man.
I ain't no angel. Really not. It's like it's. But there was no other fucker turned up. So
yeah, but you have compassion, though, brother. You have compassion, and you have heart.
I couldn't walk away. Yeah? It's like and I've had to watch other people suffer in a variety of ways. Not appropriate to recount here. So it's I didn't want humility, but the bastards forced me to have it.
Yeah.
And then the last bit, which we alluded to, actually was the art part. So I had a kind of after coming out as being pro-Brexit MAGA Q, I found my relationships with some of my previous business partners became quite strained, and I got treated rather badly. And that created a space into which, having spent many, many years doing this bleeding edge science in telecoms, suddenly that kind of had to be put on hold.
Right.
And I was very depressed. I'm very stressed because I put my full professional persona out there with this Q stuff. I've done my diligence, yeah. I've done the thinking, I've done the work. They haven't, right? It's like, so I put my name to it. It's like, but it's been a very, very stressful, lonely place. And but I picked up my camera as a way of dealing with that, and started going on daily walks and taking pictures, and it's kind of snowballing into a new career.
That's awesome.
The idea of Martin, me, being an artist is like, really? I can't even draw. I can't even write. Use a pen. It's like, how did I ever do the exams all those years ago? One of these things, I don't know. But it's like, so there's been a personal growth journey to become a more rounded human being. And what I found in doing my photography and my little bits of art and putting it out there in the world, I've got so much joy from it. Yeah. And
wow.
And so it gives me a sense of safety, and a sense of, I don't need to be right about the Q stuff. I mean, I'm right. I don't take many hostages when it comes to playing these intellectual games.
Well, Martin, that's such a liberating place. As I come from the religious world, and I'm at the point where I really think I'm right too, but it doesn't matter. I don't have to be right anymore. Right. And it's so liberating. I'm with you on that 100%.
It is that it's by connecting myself to the here and now experience of beauty in the world. Right. Look, there's a dandelion. I've got no money, but look, there's a dandelion, and there's a fluffy cloud as well. Right. And they're lined up. I can take a picture. Yes. Yeah. This is a good planet. I like this planet. It's like,
so you know what, Martin, though, you just said something, and very few people probably ever get this. And I didn't even get this myself until I read this in so many consciousness books that I've read. And, Dr. Hawkins talks about it, but beauty is God.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But Jay, I've never heard you talk about a dandelion before.
But seriously, though, beauty obviously is in the eyes of the beholder, but beauty is God. And if that's how we live our lives on a day-to-day basis, where we profoundly attempt to achieve, seek, and of course, exchange beauty with other people, you're going to live a life of, you'll be contented. You have enough.
Yes, and so it took me going from a well-paid corporate job to basically having lots of debt and no money to appreciate that money has no value.
Yes. Right.
I've basically been living in the social gift economy for the last couple of years, I mean, I could go back to corporate land in principle, but my heart would never be in there. So
yeah, you can't do it. Yeah,
that's amazing.
But came back to, if you're seeking truth, you have to be willing to let go of things that are really quite core to you in order to go there.
Absolutely.
For me, the conception of separateness, I've had to let go of it. Yeah, and it's still work in progress again, but the idea that I am separate from you and separate from the dandelion, separate from the cloud, there were certain experiences, albums, wise people, meditations, whatever, entheogens, that kind of slowly dragged me towards this place of understanding it's all connected, Martin.
That's amazing stuff. Yeah, Martin, like, we have to ask this. Everybody keeps asking in the chat room, is JFK Jr. alive, well, and involved in Q?
Is that a probability question or a philosophy question or a politics question?
I think it's a probability question.
All of the above, yeah.
Because some people get really riled when you go there, because I think it touches the emotive nerve of the JFK assassination and the loss of the Republic and the freedom. It's like so me with my autist hat on, my little Aspergery kind of thing. That's a logical postulate. Let me go and do some Bayesian and frequentist analysis in my prayers, and my answer comes up, ding, probably alive. That's my guess.
Really? That's amazing.
But I generally refuse to answer the question. For you, I'm going to be special, right?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel honored. Right? It's because I have Buckingham Palace behind me.
But if this was a normie world, and I was talking to someone who's helping the ordinary public to engage with that question, I would refuse to answer it.
Right.
Because they are approaching it still from a very emotive place, and their reasoning process is tied into those feelings too strongly. Now, there's some objective evidence that his death was fate, and there is objective evidence that he may be alive, and also makes rational sense from but I have no concrete evidence for it, and therefore one holds a fallibilist rather than a foundationalist view.
How old would JFK be right now, by the way, if he was
JFK Jr.?
Junior.
So I meant junior. So he would be like in his 50s, late 50s?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah. It's, but I think it's it's dangerous to predicate our worldviews on kind of the details of the characters on the stage.
Yeah, right.
And it's the play and the theatre and the whole production process is so much bigger than any one of the characters.
Right.
Okay, so last question, Martin, and this might be 5-10 minutes. We all talk about this, and then as we always do on the show, we want you to, you've obviously made profound changes in your life. We want you to share with people like what they can do right now, regardless of all the BS that's going on around us. So last question is, and this is really good. So what happens, which we're projecting that Trump wins, and then there's a massive reformation and restructuring of society. Yep. Is it going to, and Jeff has an interest in this question too, is it going to topple the United States? Meaning, will this be some sort of a civil war or internal strife or revolution or, something that just breaks the United States, the fabric and continuity of the United States to get to where we have to go?
I don't think so. No, I think my sense is that not the intellectual genius, but the moral genius of the process we're seeing is one which is this where we go, one we go all. It's about the sense of unity, the shift in consciousness is what stops that. And it feels like what we're being led through is what's called a paradoxical intervention, which is you force the existing system to become more extreme in order to break it, in order to establish something different. It's, so it looks like you're going the wrong way. You're becoming more divided, actually what you're doing is shrinking the space in which for the division to happen.
Interesting. Fascinating.
So it's,
By the way, Jeff agrees with you.
It feels to me like, and this is a feeling, not a fact. Okay, so it feels like we are being shepherded towards a very benevolent future.
I so agree with that.
Is that some people understand the fundamental forces. It's kind of like the theoretical physics of politics.
Right.
About
Nice.
how wars are set up, animated, how conflicts are created. And they are working at that level, which is beyond the level that most people can conceive of, in order to deliver us a different timeline with a different world. That's my sense of it. I can't prove it. Yeah, it's a synthesis that comes from everything I've seen and my own life experience and feelings. It's only as good as my own internal compass.
So Jeff is 100% agree with you. You know, obviously I've shared my opinion on this. I still think, unfortunately, so first off, I do agree with both of you. We are heading to a golden age, but I do think that there's one last stand.
Oh, there's going to be trauma to get there.
That's what I mean.
Right.
But how big is the trauma? See, I'm always asking the question, like, how big is the trauma? How divisive is that event to the fabric and framework of quote unquote civilization?
This is fascinating.
This is a spiritual war.
Absolutely.
The trauma happens primarily in that space. I think the physical side has largely been taken care of. I mean, yeah, there will be physical aspects to it, whether it's food shortages or as what else. It's a transport issues. We were just going up the roller coaster over the top, nice view over the treetops, and the screaming is about to happen. Yeah, it's like as we go down the first,
the free fall.
But it's gonna be fun once we get finished with the ride.
It's a safety system, right? It's like you'll go around the whole loop. It's but there will be that lurching feeling as we go over this edge.
Good point.
Out of control. But remember, it's the safe uncertainty.
It is.
First time you ride on the roller coaster, you're uncertain how it's going to be, but you're safe still.
Thank you. Is Trump a time traveler, Martin?
One of the most curious questions is indeed about this nature of this time thing,
right?
And space-time as a construct,
I love how you ask Martin a question and you just don't get this knee-jerk reaction. You don't get this prepared reaction. You get thoughtful consideration before you get an answer. That's what we need more of in this world.
He's one of the best guests ever on The Last Stand.
No doubt.
Because what's interesting to me is not the answer, but how you think about coming to the answer. It's the philosophy, it's the quality of your thinking process and the rigor, robustness, and righteousness of it that matters. And so once you've thought well about how you think, the answer becomes easy. Or the set of possible answers and their relative probabilities becomes relatively easy. There are a lot of what you might think of as esoteric questions, which are not easy to answer because it requires having hypotheses about how much of our science base has been hidden away from us. Yeah, so this is science. This is not woo, right? It's real science, and it's real physics. However, power comes from knowledge, and much of that knowledge has been hoarded in all kinds of dark programs. And so answering that kind of question requires having a reasonable understanding of kind of the shadows that those programs cast, as it were. Yeah. What things are not happening in our current world that you might think would have been happening, but doesn't make sense. And that requires detailed analytical expertise in understanding the military intelligence complex, which I don't have. So it requires an analyst to answer the question. And I'm not an analyst, I'm a synthesist.
I like it. Jay Campbell, anything left?
I mean, This has been such a profound podcast. I really hope that everybody in the chat room has been paying attention and not debating stupid comments that are being made inside there, because this is like, you got to go back and watch.
Yeah,
this.
for the most part, they have.
Awesome. I mean, because Martin has really taken us down some amazing paths. There is, I think, one last question somebody had.
Martin, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah. It's kind of it's a sort of semi-closing thought for me, but we still have another question. But it comes from a previous interview I did, and there's like, what's the message you want to give to people? Yeah, loving kindness is the pole star, right? It's, no matter what you think about Q and not Q, or liberals, or any of those other issues, right? You need to have a way of orientating up and down, okay? And evil is the absence of good, and the pinnacle of this thing is loving kindness, right?
True north is loving kindness.
Yeah, it's like ding, right? So first step is locate your pole star, and hold on to that, right? It's
so Martin, being right isn't most important. Loving kindness is more important than being right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I need to learn that.
Logos, pathos, ethos, kairos, topos. But it's like it's you got to be able to recognize what's the point of this life thing, and being right isn't the point.
It's totally true. So there was only one question for you, Martin, and then I want you to tell how people can sign up to your newsletter, and and by the way, I really do believe you should have a podcast, and I have somebody that could partner with you, and I think you guys could absolutely kill it. He's also of your prodigious intellect and also awareness. You guys have that combination. But he's in the group. He's already messaged you, so you guys can talk back channel. However, the question is, will there be some form of quote unquote disclosure to the unaware? Meaning, are they going to finally drop when we get to where we get free energy and all these things? Will the evidence of how we attain these lovely things come out in a way that the mass consciousness can understand that we're not alone?
Well, the answer to the Fermi paradox is staring in the mirror.
Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
My sense is that this problem cleaves into two halves, which is kind of the negative evil half and the positive good half, right? Is confronting people with all of the negative evil stuff is difficult because it traumatizes them.
Right.
And not everyone has the same ability to ingest it. So anyone who has, for example, been a victim of child sexual abuse, it'd be very, very unkind to push that kind of stuff forcefully into the public on them.
Right.
So it's back to the key stuff. It's your choice to know. Yeah, it's you have to go as far into that as you feel interested and willing and able.
Right.
There's a certain baseline that's required, but conversely, the upside stuff, I think you can infuse into society that, look, there is a golden age to be had here. There's the possibilities of what we could do when we take the psychopaths out are so mind-bogglingly wonderful that it's more a question of not overwhelming people and confusing them with too much in one go. It's there's kind of a certain rate at which society can ingest new ideas, new technologies, new processes, new purposes, and
well said.
Maybe the constraint in that whole thing is actually the storytellers. So just like Hollywood was the negative constraint,
right,
to telling bad stories, is we need storytellers to tell the stories of ordinary lives in their wonderful world.
Very well stated. Very well stated. Martin, how can people get a hold of your newsletter and a hold of your information?
Okay, so if you just go to martingeddes.com, it all looks like it's about telecoms, but it's not really. And there's a little sign up link on the right hand side there for my free newsletter. I do roughly once a week a sort of summary of this is interesting stuff I found that's relevant, nicely structured. And I also do occasional essays. I used to write a lot more essays, but at the moment there's only one of me and a certain amount of time. I've got a book in progress, which is all of my past Q type essays together with other stuff that's relevant about helping people to see the possibilities of the world they could build. So not telecom stuff, but more generally. So, for example, things like a duty of candor, to tell us how do we engineer systems so that we have candor by design. I'm also on Twitter, Martin Geddes, and if you want to see my photos, then that's where they lie. So it's
MartinGeddes.com.
Correct.
And Martin, same spelling on Twitter as well. So at Martin Geddes, correct?
That's me.
Martin, like Jay said, and we're not just trying to blow proverbial smoke up your skirt, not that you're wearing one, but this has been one of the best shows that we've had on The Last Stand. We're honored and thankful for your presence, and it's so nice to, every now and then when you want to learn something, we tend to tribalize and just be around people that are like us. But the way to true knowledge so many times is to go out and be with someone that is unlike you. And it's such a privilege and honor to have you, Martin.
Well, the only thing I want to say is Martin is not unlike any of us because he is just an aware human being who has loving kindness. That's his pole star.
Well, he's from Britain. He doesn't have a tan. So that's unlike us right now.
Martin, man, it's an honor, man. I've been reading you so long, and then just right after that, I asked you to come in the group, and you joined us. And again, it's an honor, man. And thank you so much. This has been phenomenal, and I can't wait to get to know you more. And obviously, please reach out to anybody in the group. There's a lot of people that can help you with your book. A lot of people in that group can help you with the book. So just if we can help you in any way, man, just ask.
But Martin, I can't leave without trying to extract from you a promise to come back on the show again.
Of course I will.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it's what I live for.
It's fantastic. And this information is so rare, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. He's Jay Campbell, the foremost hormone optimization expert on the planet and a growing, powerful voice in the esoteric community. And this has been Martin Geddes, probably, I would have to say, the preeminent expert that I know of, at least, on the QAnon phenomenon. We barely touched the snowflake on top of the iceberg. Maybe we can do some more research in the future, some more shows, and get down to the tip of the iceberg at least. Martin, salute to you, to everybody in the chat room. We thank you so much. Please stay there 1 second so we can say goodbye to you personally. For these great gentlemen, I'm just Jeff Daugherty saying thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you again soon.